Hello and welcome in for a Friday edition. For the second time in as many days, Oklahoma's picked up a commitment, so we figured, why not? We might as well jump onto the Soonerscoop.com YouTube and welcome in recruiting publisher, owner of the site, Josh McCuistion. How are we, Josh? Thank you for joining us. I feel like we're cheating on George a little bit.
It feels strange to be in the two box, Eddie. I mean, George he's one of the crew. It feels wrong.
Well, he didn't go to a Putnam City school, so that's why he's not involved today. But one of the reasons that we're here, or the reason that we're here, Oklahoma picks up a commitment from Tulsa Union cornerback Devon Jordan. And this was something that I remember. I went to the Westmore game not too long ago, Josh, at the beginning of the season, and I think that it was kind of one of those moments where it was like, is he going to end up in Norman, or is he going to, looking at Tuscaloosa or College Station? But Oklahoma earns the commitment today, and another big pickup for Brent Venables and Jay Valai on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, it's a big win for Oklahoma. This is a guy, and it really continues the trend at Tulsa Union. When people talk about Oklahoma having trouble in Tulsa, if there's one school that has been steadfast and loyal as far as Oklahoma's track record there, it's pretty much Tulsa Union. They've really – you go back years, probably we're approaching 2 decades now since Oklahoma really had a loss at Union. And, you look back to some of the players that have been productive for Oklahoma. Bob's guy, Carson Meyer,
sure.
Jeff Mead. You
Trey
go through
Brown,
that list,
I think, had a little bit of a run at Oklahoma.
Yeah. And you talk about Dom Franks. I mean,
sure.
Obviously, one of the really outstanding Union products. But yeah, with Devon Jordan, you're getting. I should say Devon Jordan. He's corrected me before. It's just something about the way I read it. But you're getting a really instinctive corner. I mean, a guy that I've always kind of liked, and I admit this about myself. Union and the way they coach their corners and some of the things they have them do, I really like. They're very aggressive. They're good with their hands. Eddie, you and I talk about this at camps all the time. There's nothing I hate more than watching a guy come up and play press and then just letting a guy run. Well, that's not what Devon Jordan's about. Like, he is going to get physical with you. He's going to try to reroute you. He wants to, just try and take you completely out of the play. And as you can see in these highlights, I mean, he's a guy that's aggressively going to come up and play run. We know at a place like Union, kind of as I referenced already, they're going to be well coached. He's going to know the ins and outs. He knows what it takes to win. Union is obviously one of the powerhouses in the state of Oklahoma. So I really like this for Oklahoma. It's a good, solid get. You kind of continue those good feelings in state. And I know there was some buzz probably a couple of weeks ago that maybe he was going to wait a little too long or Oklahoma was going to move in a different direction. But I can tell you there were schools that are not giving up on him. I was told last night Texas A&M was at his game watching him last night. And then, of course, he decides for Oklahoma today. So I think Devon kept everybody guessing a little bit until the end.
You think this is a matter of somebody that just wants to jump in the boat? I mean, obviously, there's a lot of momentum on the defensive side of the ball for Oklahoma right now. Is this just a situation that he was ready to be done with it and kind of get a spot for himself inside of Oklahoma's 2024 class? As we've talked about on the Unofficial 40 this past week, it's starting to become a little bit maybe of a numbers crunch at the back end of this thing.
It really is. I mean, you look at it now, and I know that On3's commitment list, it's caused some confusion, has 27 guys listed. It includes currently the Danny Salih kid, the junior college defensive lineman. I think he is a PWO NIL guy. That's been my understanding. Now, that may have shifted a little bit. Well, I need to – that's something I'm still kind of efforting to clarify all the details on. But there are at least 26 known – scholarship guys in this class right now. And I think this was a big part of it, with Devon Jordan and I know we'll get into Michael Boganowski, but what's interesting is Oklahoma's kind of starting to play chess a little bit because with Devon Jordan, there was an offer, or I guess at the cornerback position, Oklahoma made an offer a couple weeks ago to a kid named Cameron Campbell out of Tampa Bay Tech. And there was talk of him coming in for a visit soon. There was some real interest from Oklahoma. Well, a couple weeks later, Devon Jordan doesn't need to wait anymore, and he's ready to pull the trigger and ends up in Oklahoma.
Interesting.
You look at Michael Boganowski a couple weeks ago. Oklahoma makes an offer to Reggie Powers,
sure,
who had just decommitted from Michigan State. I think Oklahoma's trying to find out where they are with a few of these last remaining targets. And, in a couple of cases, you're not going to be able to find a guy that can kind of be that lever to push a guy over the edge. But at the same time, the guys you can, I think they're trying to, and it's not about pressure. It's just about, if you're with us, you probably have enough information at this point to make that decision.
Specifically with Jay Valai and his first 2 years now on staff with Brent Venables, you look at the group that he brought in last year: Makari Vickers, Josiah Wagner, two guys that have had a whole lot of kind of buzz around them coming out of preseason camp, and then even a guy that we were more familiar with probably in Jacoby Johnson, and then you add in the commitment today from Devon Jordan, as well as Jeremiah Newcomb and Eli Bowen. What do you make of this group so far? You could even probably throw in Kendall Dolby as well out of the JUCO ranks. What do you make of the group that he has brought in at that cornerback position? And do you think it speaks to a little bit of what people have been able to see just in terms of development with, obviously kind of the emergence of Gentry Williams this year?
What's interesting to me about this group is how I think last year you look at that group you're talking about, Eddie, Dolby, Jacoby Johnson, Makari Vickers, really Josiah Wagner's the one outlier where you're like, that's not a big guy.
Yeah.
Like, all those guys have good size, very physical. Jacoby is, not just like, oh, that's a good looking guy. That's a cornerback prototype. That's what it looks like in your perfect world, but you don't find many of those guys. This class, you've got Eli Bowen about 5'9", Devon Jordan's about 5'10", Jeremiah Newcomb, I've never been next to him, but he stands, from what I've gathered, somewhere between 5'11" and 6 foot, which is perfectly fine. Bowen's the only one of those guys where you'd say, okay, that's a little on the small side, but it's obviously not a deterrent for Oklahoma. And that's what's interesting to me is you're getting there doesn't seem to be, as there was under Alex Grinch, this hard line idea of it's got to be this guy. Like they care about, can you cover? Are you physical? They talked about it a lot with Gentry Williams this year, how much they loved watching him in high school, that he was willing to come up and be physical and make the tackle and wasn't one of these guys that just wanted to be a cover corner. So I think they look at things beyond just height, weight, speed, but all of these guys can run. And I will say, Jeremiah Newcomb being the first commitment in this class, I think people overlook him a little bit. You watch some of his senior tape, there's some stuff that's really interesting there. Guy with good size, easy acceleration. I like what Jay Valai is building in this room. And then you throw in the development you're seeing, how much better Woody Washington's gotten over the last year, how
right.
Gentry Williams looks like he could be an elite corner. You're seeing not just good evaluations, but real development.
In terms of numbers at the cornerback position for this specific class in 2024, anybody else out there right now that maybe people should keep their eye on?
Obviously I mentioned the Cameron Campbell offer. I would think this pretty much nulls that. I think that probably puts that idea to bed. I would think if they go anywhere else in the corner market, it will probably be in the portal.
Sure.
Like I just don't see, you look at some of the youth there, like we've talked about several of these guys. We haven't even mentioned Kenai Walker, who's
right.
really had some strong moments for Oklahoma. And it's just, as long as it feels like Kenai's been there, he's just going to be a junior next year. So there's plenty of time for him. So I would guess, I would be even surprised if in the portal they went after a corner, unless they were to lose a couple guys, going the other direction. So that'll be something we'll have to watch. But I like where they're at corner. I would bet this is probably it, almost certainly in recruiting. And I would be pretty surprised, again, if there was a move made in the portal.
As I said at the top, this is the second straight day that Oklahoma's picked up a commitment on the defensive side of the ball. And Thursday, Oklahoma got a commitment from Michael Boganowski, the number one player in Kansas, and a guy that, you've talked about, I think, on a couple of recruiting breakdown reports that we've done here on Soonerscoop.com's YouTube channel before. We talked about him on the Unofficial 40, but maybe one of the, like a perfect fit when you're talking about what Brent Venables wants to be able to do in the secondary.
Yeah. You talk about it. You kind of look at what he brings to the table. And the comparison I made in the commitment breakdown I do for every OU commitment, I compared him to Kendall Daniels. And I know people will say, oh, OU wasn't that. So don't forget, Brent Venables at Clemson, when they were recruiting and could go anywhere in the country, he was hard after Kendall Daniels. He wanted Kendall Daniels. So I think when you see that comparison and understand that that's kind of what Oklahoma's looking at, where he may he may start as a pure safety. I just think he ends up as a cheetah. Like, that's just where I see him. He's very physical, very violent, going to be a guy that can run and turn if he needs to. Kind of a guy that I think brings some blend of Deshaun McCullough's kind of physicality and his ability near the line of scrimmage, but I think is a little bit more gifted as a pass defender and kind of has a little bit more of that Justin Harrington side of himself. So I think this is one of those guys, when you look at the way Oklahoma recruited him, kind of spearheaded by Brandon Hall, how hard they worked here. This is a guy they see as undervalued. This is a guy they think is a lot better than, I think we've got him at like 400 in the country in the On3 rankings. And I think they see him as a top 200 kind of guy, a guy that can absolutely be a difference maker, because the way things have been communicated to me, I'm not saying they see him as, an equal to Peyton Bowen, but there are some parallels in the value they think he could bring to that defense. They think he's a difference maker.
Speaking of Peyton Bowen, I think the one guy on staff that we probably never talk about enough is somebody that was relatively familiar with Oklahoma the first time around when he was here, and that's Brandon Hall, who did a really good job with Boganowski, as well as people will remember a year ago he was the one that was down there with Jeff Lebby when they were recruiting Jackson Arnold and Peyton Bowen. Is it maybe undervalued a little bit just how well he's done? And on top of what we're now seeing at the safety position with Oklahoma and kind of the meteoric rise that we talked about on the Unofficial 40 this week with somebody like a Billy Bowman.
I don't think there's any question. I think, and honestly, and I'll own it myself, he was the one hire, and I knew Brandon a little bit from his first tenure at Oklahoma, so it wasn't that I thought it was a bad hire or anything like that. I just didn't know him much because He had been at Jacksonville State, or not Jacksonville State. He had been. I know he was down there at one point, but he was at Troy when he was, I guess the year prior to coming to Oklahoma, and I really thought, okay, we'll see what he can do as a recruiter. I knew, being part of that Venables tree, I knew he would understand the defense. I knew he could develop guys. I knew he would be a stickler for details. He would be a good coach. I didn't know what he'd be as a recruiter, but man, he's impressed me a lot. I mean, like, again, you can talk about Peyton Bowen, and I mean, there's a lot of guys on the staff that had a hand, I guess you'd say, in Peyton Bowen's recruitment. But Brandon Hall was the guy there, on signing day, talking to Bowen, talking to his family, making sure they had all the answers they needed. They could do everything they needed to do, and really trying to get that kind of ball across the goal line, to use the football football reference. But with you look around, I mean, this is obviously another good win. Like I said, people will look at it and say, oh, it's it's a 3-star from Kansas. Again, that's a guy that OU identified really early. They knew they liked Boganowski very early on. And even to a guy I went and spoke to last night, Jonah Williams, down in Galveston, Texas, that is a top 20 guy overall in the country, another kind of Peyton Bowen level recruit that OU's recruiting as a safety, and he loves Brandon Hall. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's just one of those guys that he's not on Twitter all the time. You don't see him as much, and, he's not a quote machine and does some of these great things that a lot of the other guys do. It's no fault of theirs. But Brandon just kind of quietly goes about his work, and it's really impressive that he's done all this and probably gotten far too little fanfare for the work he's put in.
You can see Josh's interview with Jonah Williams from Thursday night on Soonerscoop.com's editorial page. It's up on the Crimson Corner as well on Soonerscoop.com. We're going to probably go back on Monday, and we'll talk kind of about your weekend, and we'll go over the Jonah Williams stuff. But I just sent you an expletive-filled sentence after you sent me back some of the video. He is about as good as you could possibly look for a 2025 kid. In terms of just defense overall and this recruiting class overall, I don't know if this would be maybe the correct way to ask you this, but is it just drastically different from what they had been bringing in years past? Like, are you noticing a sizable difference in style of athlete or just overall football player that Oklahoma's brought in the previous 5 years that maybe they're bringing in this 2024 class? I mean, I think everybody knows the defensive line group is unbelievable. Maybe one of the best ones, as you've said, that they've brought in the last 20 years. Everywhere else, though, it just seems like they have some guys that you can get really excited about, knowing kind of where this baseline is and this foundation has been built here over the first year and a half under Brent.
I don't think there's any question. It's massive. And I think there's a couple of different ways you can look at it. First of all, like you look at the defensive line group. Wyatt Gilmore plays for one of the best teams in the state of Minnesota. Jaden Jackson and David Stone play for IMG, arguably the best team in the country. Danny Okoye's, even as a homeschool team, they won a national title last year. Nigel Smith's chasing a state title in Texas. James Nesta plays for one of the best teams in North Carolina. There is literally not a bad team on this defensive group. These are kids that understand winning football, how you do it. Several of them are either coaches' kids or just grew up around the game. Like there's a familiarity that you haven't seen. And then on top of that, I don't have to have the conversation nearly so often. And again, some of these guys are projections a little bit, and to some degree, all high school kids are. But it's far less of, well, look at this guy's track times and look how big and tall he is. Certainly, if you can make that work, it's going to be good. These guys are football players. Like Jaden Jackson, you turn on the tape and he may be 6'1" and 300 pounds. It's not like the ideal defensive tackle that everybody dreams of, but all the dude does is make plays. Like, I mean, just time and time again, he's right there. Because I know people that will tell you as a high school player, Jaden Jackson is less of the guy they want to face than David Stone because he's so big and strong and powerful, and he's just a problem snap in and snap out. So I think those things are really interesting. James Nesta goes under discussed, but again, like I said, playing for one of the best teams in the state of North Carolina, has, made some big plays for them, really, I think has a chance to win a state title out there. So it's just unanimous when you look at it. I mean, Michael Patterson McDonald's taking Westmore. They beat Jinx and Broken Arrow in back-to-back weeks. I mean, like, they are doing some good things. And so many of these guys, like I said, they know what success is. They know how to get there. And so I don't think it's going to be the culture shock when they get to Oklahoma, because they know, sure, they haven't done that level of work before, but they understand that this, whatever they're being asked to do, there's a reason for it.
Let's talk a little offensive line. I think that's a group that we talked about on the Unofficial 40 this week, just in terms of building momentum. It seems like Bill Beatonbo's group is rapidly coming together. They already have 4 guys committed in Eugene Brooks, Isaiah Autry, Josh Iasosha, and then Daniel Akinkumi from last week over in London, who was on the NFL Network this morning, which I thought was pretty cool. You put it in a forecast for Grant Brix. When does this pop, I guess, is the final question.
There is it's really an interesting thing, because it's one of those deals where when I talk to, I guess you would say, people that would know but maybe aren't directly connected to everything, they'll say it's, by the Kansas game, he may have announced and may have decided. When you talk to others, it's much more like, oh no, there's been nothing concrete said. Yeah. And you wonder if there's just a little bit of hesitancy to, we're not going down this road. It's been close. He's been close to deciding for Nebraska. There's been some times when you thought it might be Oklahoma. There's even been some times when you thought it might be Kansas State. And at some point, you just kind of have to say, we'll get there whenever he gets there. It's one of those things. But what I don't think there is any denying is that if he chooses right now, it's going to be Oklahoma. Now, if it drags out, there's always kind of this window. When you first start to hear stuff like that, you might have 2 weeks where you can really maintain that momentum and kind of, okay, he's getting graphics together, which in Grant Brix's case, I'd struggle to think that's what this is about. But obviously Nebraska has heard the rumors. They're trying to squelch it. They're trying to slow him down, all those things. But I think maybe he's finally come to it that, again, as you and I have talked about a bunch of times on this exact player, Eddie, there is a real feeling for him that Bill Beatonbow and Jerry Schmidt are the best combination of the 2 things that matter most in an offensive lineman's success when he looks at K-State, Oklahoma, and Nebraska. Bill's got the biggest track record of producing offensive linemen, and obviously Jerry Schmidt's worked with, let's be honest, some of the greatest offensive linemen of this generation, and guys like Lane Johnson and Trent Williams.
Graham Brix isn't the only one. What can you tell us about Eddie Luis Pierre out of Tampa Catholic?
Yeah, Eddie is one of those guys. I had a chance to see him last year. When I went down, he's a teammate of Lewis Carter, the Oklahoma freshman kind of linebacker hybrid. And I was very impressed. I've always been a little surprised kind of looking at his rankings. We've got him around 305 in the industry rankings, and he's not even a nationally rated guy at On3. But he's a big guy, very physical, very strong, comes from a good lineage. His older brother played at Florida, started for several years, and I believe is now on an NFL practice squad. Richard Goriage is his name. And I like what he brings. I think Oklahoma's in really good shape. He's expected to be in town this weekend. I've heard nothing to tell me that's changed. And it kind of feels like the perfect moment for him to decide, because it really, for a while, it felt like UCF was making this very interesting. Oregon's come on lately. I've even heard some Miami talk over the last couple of weeks. But I just think his relationship with Bill Bedenbaugh, he's the guy that, for some that will remember, tweeted out at the time he got an offer, a video of him as like a kid talking about Trent Williams and how OU was his dream school. Like, this is a guy that had thought about playing for Oklahoma since childhood. So I just think Oklahoma's got a chance to close that down this weekend. He's coming up on his own dime. This isn't even an official visit. So I think there is a real possibility he could make it, 3 commitments in 3 or 4 days here for OU. And then you throw in the possibility of Grant Brix and, frankly, a couple of others that are still kind of out there and we're waiting to hear from. So this is it's got a chance to be, we've been talking about it for a few weeks. It had a chance to be a good close for Oklahoma. And there's a very good chance that Michael Boganowski and Devon Jordan are kind of the two that start pushing this thing to the wire.
In a way, is it a little surprising that it's so, I guess it's October 20th, so it's not really technically early. I mean, you got a early signing period coming up. And I mean, I think you put it in the Scoop, which you can check out on Soonerscoop.com. Today, 20 early enrollees so far in this 2024 class. Is it a little surprising, though, that maybe this didn't happen sometime at the end of November?
In a way, yeah. Like, I really do. But I think that you've just kind of continued to see the slow trickle, from Danny Okoye, Daniel Akinkumi, even Nigel Smith, very early in the season here, to where Oklahoma just kept getting tighter and tighter with numbers. And we've talked about it forever. This staff isn't high pressure, again, because they don't want you to take any more visits. They want you to be done with your recruiting. So they can't really be high pressure. They have to say, hey, we do whatever you need to do, get it all out, make sure you're, confident in your decision, and then we'll move forward with you. So they kind of have to play the long game. But at the same time, once spots start filling up, and, we kind of referenced it earlier with Devon Jordan, once those things start to happen, you get into this situation where it is, guys, we don't have that many spots. It's kind of becoming best player available. Now, obviously, the offensive line, they're looking to take 2 and maybe even 3 if they could find a way to steal Jordan Seaton here at the end.
Sure.
But, there is some of these guys, it's just a deal where, okay, it's you. It may be Devon Jordan or another linebacker. I mean, so you're not just competing with Cameron Campbell. You might have a linebacker that OU likes. And again, that's purely hypothetical. I'm not saying that's the scenario, but Oklahoma can kind of come to them and just say, hey, numbers are getting tight here. If you think you know what you want to do, it's probably time to jump.
Real quick with the offensive line stuff as we jump back, the one thing that you look at this current class and then possibly the guys in Brix and Luis Pierre that Oklahoma could possibly be adding, Eugene Brooks, 6'4", 325. Isaiah Autry, a little bit different than the rest, 6'7", 290. Daniel Akinkumi, 6'5", 320. Joshua Isosha, 6'3.5", 305. And then Grant Brix, obviously, 6'6", 290. Eddie Luis Pierre, 6'3", 335. Important pieces that maybe get lost in the discussion when you're talking about making the move to the SEC. I know there's so much talk about, having really good defensive linemen that are able to play at that level of football. ultra important that they get some offensive linemen in here that can make a difference, and especially when you're talking about a backfield that they have coming in. I saw Xavier Robinson last night. Taylor Tatum, obviously. And then, Jackson Arnold over the next couple years. It's very important that they go out and finish this class with a really good group coming in to kind of usher them into the SEC.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can talk about the defensive line group, but that offensive line group, which was quite good last year. You look at that class with Caden Green and a guy like Logan Howland that I absolutely am a believer in.
I see him every day after practice getting extra work in, and I send you like little screenshot videos of him behind the interviews. He looks really, really good. And then Josh Bates as well.
Yeah. I mean, so, you look at that and you say, and I know, again, I don't want to leave anybody out. Heath Ozida has had some good early reviews. So, there is reason to think, but I feel like Oklahoma has lacked some of those kind of high. I mean, Logan Howland is a good example, like a high upside guy where and I feel like he fits Jerry Schmidt so well in being a guy that, okay, give him a couple years, let him add weight, let him do it naturally, get bigger, stronger, and all of a sudden all that athleticism meets, his new 310-pound frame, and all of a sudden you've really got something. These guys are a little interesting because, like you said, these are bigger physical guys where Oklahoma may have to shape their body a little bit. It's not so much just putting on weight and getting some muscle. These guys are big and strong, but they may have to, lose 10 or 15 and then kind of put it back on through the weight room. So that is interesting because it's not that's not something Jerry Schmidt shown he can do. You look at guys like Duke Robinson, who absolutely fit that mold as well. But there is there's no question that some of the other guys are a little bit more in line with that thinking. I think, like a Grant Bricks, Daniel Akinkumi, who, although he's listed at 315, you look at him, he looks fairly lean in what he does. And I think that's part of why I buy into those guys, because they fit so well what Schmidt tends to do once he gets guys into the program.
Very good, Josh. Thanks for joining us on the instant reaction to Devon Jordan's commitment. And then, obviously Michael Boganowski and a number of guys that maybe Oklahoma fans can keep their eye on here moving forward. If you haven't checked it out yet, make sure that you stop by Soonerscoop.com, read George Story's story today on Dylan Gabriel, a really good read. Talked to Jeff Levy, talked to Garrett Gabriel, who is Dylan Gabriel's father, as well as a couple other people that are close to Dylan, and kind of his answer back, really, as he puts himself in the center of the Heisman Trophy race. Oklahoma back out on the field on Saturday, 11 a.m. on ABC. We will be here for the instant reaction tomorrow with George Stoya, as well as the Eskridge Lexus postgame show with myself, Gary Murdoch, and George, wrapping up the events from Saturday morning. So, Josh, we appreciate it. We will talk to you hopefully again soon. That means that probably Oklahoma's gotten another commitment if we do. But if not, we'll talk to you on Monday.
Sounds good, Eddie. And yeah, I think OU fans should hang around this weekend. It should be interesting.
Very good. We'll talk to you next time.